For once, I only have one sheet of paper.
This is the second trial round.
So refreshing.
Can I move some of the stuff so I can sit next to my board?
I gotta know all the points.
My boy, you mean?
Actually.
Actually, we weren't partners first.
Wow, so it's hard to decide.
You're okay. Oh, okay.
I'm a little intimidated by Steve.
What? Wow.
Oh my gosh, Steve. My name is Florence. Hi. Okay, so firstly, I'm gonna start my speech by defining a few words in that motion. So firstly, we define karma balance as in the system of thoughts where people believe in a next life, where you are either born, where you just like, where you have like a better or a worse life depending on your actions. We define divine mercy as the notion that people are inherently sinful and you can only obtain redemption through having a good relationship and having faith in the God that you believe in. And we also include in a system of thought where divine mercy, they believe that unbelievers will end up in hell and that is their final destiny. So firstly, I will go through 3 points of constructive about why our side of the world will make our side of the world is better, and we will judge that based on criteria of like social happiness, accountability, and principle who is being held accountable.
Point of clarification.
Yes.
Okay, so on divine mercy, are you saying that who gets to decide the good relationship with God? It's not like a priest, is it? It's just like your individual relationship with God and the mercy that He gives you, right?
Looking at history, we would like to argue that divine mercy and who gets to go to heaven is decided by the church. So firstly, my first point, motivation for justice and moral pursuits. The system of karma is better at holding people accountable for what they do. Therefore, it provides more incentive for people to be good. Why is that? Firstly, karma, with the system of karma, we're looking at the net action and the net effect of every single action, which means that every single action matters. Well, on the side of divine mercy, it's not really action-based, it's more a faith-based. You can be a horrible person, and the system of thought actually does assume that people are all sinners when they start off, and then you can redeem yourself by having a good relationship with God. And why is that less effective in terms of holding people accountable for what they do and motivating them to be good people? Because it has more tolerance for sins, because people are it's easier that people get forgiven by their sins, and also on a time frame, it assumes that you can be saved in whatever period of your life. So you can be a horrible person for the first first few decades of your life and suddenly revert and find your God and still be saved under that system of thought. And second point on the problem of polarization and tolerance, we believe that the karma system is more effective as a system that includes all human beings in their moral justice notions. It is a universal notion where all human beings are included, and whereas with divine mercy, you have the concept of believers versus non-believers, and where you can only be saved if you are a believer and adhere to the principles of God. And I believe that firstly, that segregation is incredibly unhealthy to the society because it promotes people to have religious-based discriminations against non-believers, and it turns people against each other based on their religion, and it will disrupt our social unity, whereas karma has a much more inclusive time frame and inclusive model. Third point, centralized power to the church. Okay.
Why cannot people choose not to believe karmic balance?
They do not. They can choose. So we're talking about that on a perspective of the believers. For the believers, they are more likely to be more inclusive towards other non-believers because they believe that everyone is applicable under this time frame, under this framework of karma. You shake your hand. And So my third point of centralized power to the church, because we believe that the notion of who is going to heaven or hell in the model of divine mercy is defined by the authority, and that is the only possible way for us to have a definition of a standardized definition. You will be giving too much authority to the church, which can induce corruption, and give them that power to have the power to discriminate and abuse minorities such as LGBTQ and non-religious people. And this is especially dangerous when you combine with our second argument, where it's divine mercy are more likely to turn people against each other and induce polarization within the society. And overall, I would like to examine the two worlds that this motion presents, and look at why our world is better. Because if you look at the two systems of thought, right, karma is based on interaction with your surrounding, with people around you. It's based on what good you can do to the society, and that is we believe is more effective in holding people accountable and motivating them to be better people. But if you look at their world, where it's purely based on divine mercy, it's a very personal interaction with your relationship with a God that's represented by the church, who has a very high chance of being corrupt. So because of this God-centered frame, God-centered system of morality, it's much more easier on their side to have a church-based monopoly oppression against minorities and social segregation. So we believe that because we're focused on, because our time frame is our framework of morality is focused on people's individual action. You treat them as individuals. You hold every one of their actions accountable, and then and these actions are based on how they behave with their surroundings and their society. It's a better motivator for people to be friendlier, to be more responsible for their own actions, and also it prevents cases of religious radicalization and induce more social unity. Thank you. Wow, that was a terrible.
I think the speakers are their honorable remarks, and now calls to the floor the leader of the opposition. Here, here.
Leader of opposition is speaking in the third person.
Leader of opposition is speaking in the third person.
Honorable panel, opening government has abusively modeled and framed this debate and pushed this debate into a world where they don't recognize or where they treat our side unfairly, and they don't recognize the realities of how the world works and how this motion actually plays into the world, right? So what I'm going to do for you at this speech is first off the top explain to you why their model is abusive and just shouldn't be fully counted, and challenge it with kind of a counterprop, and explain to you the issues with how they view karmic balance versus divine mercy. Then I'm going to go in and rebut their points, which are for the most part very just oppositional, not very constructive at all, and then I'll go through and explain and introduce our points. So first into how the model is poor, and how it doesn't really encapsulate, right? So they say that karmic balance is in your next life, if you're going to be better or worse depending on the weight of your actions and how it balances it out, right? So this is somewhat good, but it's very in the theoretical, right? So the issue where we get into divine mercy is they say okay, so karmic balance is this theoretical idea that can play in a religion, but divine mercy is decided by the church, and it's basically you're based on your good relationship with God, and unbelievers end up in hell. What this actually what a more realistic idea of what this is divine mercy in the abstract sense, as they painted karmic balance in the abstract sense, is more so about whether or not yes, your relationship with God, but it's a very personal relationship, right? There's the idea that there is mercy for you in life, and that God or Jesus or whatever figure in whatever hypothetical religion that divine mercy would exist in is going to have mercy on your soul at the end of your life if you are able to pick up that relationship with God and prove that you're a good person and repent for your sins, right? That's a more accurate depiction of divine mercy looks like. This isn't a debate over Christianity versus Buddhism or Hinduism, right? This is a debate over divine mercy versus karmic balance, right? So now to get into their points, right? And just kind of like on that, to challenge, to prove why their depictions are right, like it's literally just taking us out of words and saying like when divine mercy fails in the church, that's what we have to defend. Like that's just kind of like absurd idea to front. So into the first point about accountability, right? They say it's an incentive to do good, and that there's less tolerance for bad action under like this karmic balance. I'll get this more into it when we get into our points, but like the fact of the matter is that like in this like this accountability, like maybe like you're forcing some people to like try to outweigh their bad in life with their good, right? But the intention behind this isn't always in the right place, right? And I think intention is an important thing to consider when you're looking at an afterlife, and whether like the society that you're producing, whether or not people are kind of just acting in a manner that's almost like a social credit system, where it's like, am I doing something good? Am I doing something bad? Like being very paranoid, and like whether or not anyone's actually acting out of like true like interest of like doing actually good in society, doing good in this world, being a good person, or whether or not they're just paranoid about whether or not they're going to get into the afterlife. And then also like along this idea, they say that like, oh, like you're like bad. Someone can be bad for 3/4 of life, and then just like it's like become practicing under divine mercy. Like literally the same thing can happen under your side of the world. You can have someone who like makes all their money really unethically and do a ton of bad stuff, and the last 10 years of life like do heavy philanthropy and donate a lot of that money and try to do a ton of good to offset it. And if you're in your world, the way you balance it, if you can offset it, that person is scot-free as well. So like these same issues happen on your side of the house. It's not mutually exclusive. What we actually get is better intention on our side. Into their second point about like the believers and non-believers and like being more inclusive, right? Like the thing is that they base this a lot on like the church and like the history with Christianity and Catholicism, right? And so like it's important to like point to the aspects where like divine mercy and like Christianity fails because of like power-hungry people in the church to say that like this is why divine mercy is bad, right? Like they also have to tie karmic balance. If they want to tie divine mercy to some religion, they have to realize that karmic balance is probably going to be tied to some religion in society as well, like if you're going to support it, right? So like you're going to get non-inclusion on your side as well, right? Like if you look at India and Hinduism, right? There are these strong class divisions based on the karmic balance and what you get assigned, right? So you have people who are literally labeled untouchable and are like considered scum in society and are shit on by the rest of society, where you have people who are like Brahmin at the very top and are born into that position based on karmic balance, and like these are predefined class roles that are structured in by the idea of karmic balance, right? So if you get the same ideas of like non-inclusiveness on your side of the house, and actually we would actually argue on our side that you actually do get some inclusiveness, right? Because under divine mercy, people are trying to encourage other people and to tell them about how there is divine mercy and why that can benefit them in society and why that can benefit them later on in going into the afterlife, and they're trying to help them, right? On to the third point about centralized power of the church, like this kind of falls because it's like the ability to abuse minorities. Same thing happens on your side of the house if you look at like strict Hinduism and like caste structures about how people can be abused and be stuck into like these lower classes like the untouchables and just like shit on those who are largely the minorities, right? And so we see like that this can still happen with karmic balance. It's not unique. They say that it's just like controlled by the church and social segregation. This literally happens on your side of the house too. This is not a unique point. Yeah.
Our side is saying that because divine mercy is essentially a God-centered system, whereas our system is a people social-centered system, it gives much more power to the church and whoever controls that system.
Okay, but like listen, you can have someone. Yes, it's a people-centered system, maybe, but you can have a God-centered aspect of that. Like Hinduism has gods, where people like the like Brahmins and the priestess, they get to control who's like in what caste and whatnot. There's still control. You can't just say it's only on our side. Into our points. The first one's about how this divine mercy accepts the realities of the world, right? What this means is that like the world is really complicated, and they don't really explain to you how karmic balance works, right? So like if I one action that you have that might be like just what you have to do can have a negative effect in the world and like morally, right? Like if I need to like buy clothes, but the cheapest clothes are like built in sweatshops, and people are like halfway across the world, and those workers are treated poorly. Am I treated like, do I lose my karmic balance for that? Do I go down? And what you see is like that the world is like complex in this way, and it's hard to judge people, right? And so no, you're out of predicting. So like what divine mercy is, it recognizes the disadvantages in the world given to some society, right? Because what this means is that there's no barrier to entry, and there's no barrier to like moving on into the afterlife and going to a better life, right? Because in karmic balance, you have to like outweigh it. And where the world is like infinitely complex and like the actions you can have and their effect in society, the positive or negative, and more likely in today's society where things are crazy, they're more likely to be negative. Like if you like need to take a job at like Amazon because like it's the only job you can get, but then Amazon is a morally dubious company that like fucks over their workers, and like it's bad, then it, like you heard for that. So like now you can actually like there's no barrier to entry to faith and like the concept of an afterlife where there was. The second is that like who benefits from this is like those who are benefiting like have more resources. So people who don't have resources are going to like or from karmic balance are going to be those who have more resources can offset it. So like what this recognizes is that people who don't have resources and struggle to like bounce back, like put in a bad position, maybe low socioeconomic status, are hard to like bounce back and like get to the point where they can break even on the karmic balance. And what you see on Divine Mercy is they can if they just like have close relationship with God and have the faith. And the last is, and Stephen will get into this more, is the effect this has on the living with the subjectiveness of good and bad, and that there's no perfect situation that can benefit everyone. Divine Mercy is a more hopeful society moving forward. Proud to oppose. Thank the speaker for their honorable remarks. I'd now like to call forward the Deputy Prime Minister to give their speech in Axiom 7 minutes. Here, here.
Okay, firstly, I will clarify this, rebut some points, and using a clarification that opposition has failed to realize, I will add about 4 points of rebuttal. Secondly, I will provide 3 points of rebuilding construction for my partner's case. And lastly, I will weigh our cases and see where we fall in terms of the round. So in terms of the round. Okay, so firstly, this debate, opening opposition basically implies a couple times that, for example, we are constructing a world. Well, firstly, this is just completely off the table because we're saying we prefer a world in which the notion that already exists is this. So we are saying that it doesn't matter whether or not intention is good or bad because we just are looking at what is actually existed in the world. Intention doesn't matter because of like what people do in the world. So now we will support this. Okay, now also, so we want to clarify that we are talking about being selfish, so we recognize that in society people will be selfish and will focus on their own ideas. We're saying that we want to use that to actually promote a better society. So that's why we don't care about intention, because if we promote a better society, we say, sure, people can be selfish. Okay, so now we would like to also mention that opening opposition basically says that like personal notion of society, like people, like it's more personal when it's like divine entity, and for some reason that like makes it more like it makes people more motivated to like follow this. Well, okay, but if people are more motivated to follow this certain religious identity, that religious identity itself has been enforced upon them by society already. So we're saying if this has been enforced upon them by society, we're saying this moral code or whatever has been or not moral code, more like judgment of God based off society, if that has already been embedded in their mind, they're not going to just like suddenly deviate from that and like judge different like ways of acting good in the world or have different reasons. Like they're actually going to follow this specifically and potentially feel bad if they don't. So we're saying that on our side of the house we differ because I'll talk about it later. Okay, so we're not saying that people can't have the personal conception. Sure, in our side of the house we can also have the personal conception, but the personal conception is also dangerous, but it is dangerous on their side because the construction exists in society already as a tangible moral code that is written in books, in religion, for example. Okay, now we also want to say that like, okay, so also in our their side of the house, basically we have like a universal context for religion. So like when people have actions, their actions are judged based off the church or whatever, and they're saying that this is like it doesn't actually cause it doesn't cause non-inclusion because it causes the same amount of non-inclusion. But we're saying that like if this moral code is constructed by society explicitly, like we're not just saying on our side of the house we're saying, oh, we're just gonna let like the good and bad, like don't do bad things, don't like do good things. That's like perfectly permissible, very like logical on our side. Then like we're basically leaving it up for whatever divine entity we imagine to actually decide what's good and bad. We're just leaving it to them. We're less likely to judge the actions explicitly. On their side, people are non-included because people can be categorized when they do actions that people generally think are bad, and they can explicitly be judged according to like a specific moral code that is entrenched in the society. Later. Okay. Now, secondly, because this is an entrenched society, essentially we're just saying that we provide less non-inclusion. We're saying we prefer a world in which we don't have this as much. We have more inclusion because it's not entrenched in a moral code explicitly. We're saying that good and bad are like these concepts that we kind of construct, but like we're just saying that it will be judged eventually. It's more of a judgment case. Yes.
Okay, so it's a wash between the two sides about what's more like entrenched in society. Because on your side of the house, there are still things that are entrenched in society, what's good or bad, right? But even further than that, like if you have your own idea like of what is like good or like what is going to be into the afterlife of even if you do something that's bad, like you're not judged because you can be saved by divine mercy.
So basically, like in our case, we've already established that like no, it's not a wash because. Though there are conceptions of good and bad already exist in society, what eventually happens is in our preferred notion, we're saying that it's more likely for people to not adhere to these constructions because they are more likely to say it will be judged eventually. They're more likely to leave it up to what happens at the end of their lives. Okay, now according to and now I will provide more construction, 3 points of construction. All right, so now for accountability, we've already explained that like in our system, we explicitly provide a means by which people can actually or people are inclined to do good things. They're inclined to basically look at their actions and judge them according to selfishly how they want to exist in the afterlife. And our system provides us better because we introduce the element of actually acknowledging this selfishness and going along with it and saying, yes, we prefer good things to exist in society, so people see that they're doing bad things and think, oh, I don't want bad things to happen to me. They'll selfishly decide not to do those bad things. Okay, now also, discrimination. So we have already established that this moral code is explicitly, you can argue, sure, that like moral codes are always entrenched in society, but the problem is like, in your case, if you have a world in which it's based on divine, like some divine being that judges it, that is explicitly written in a religious context, which is commonly seen today and in history, then you actually explicitly have rules that are written. You have explicit actions that are like, the actions are defined in terms of the text itself, and we've already established that that is a bad thing. Okay, now what are the impacts of our case? Okay, so basically if we have a karmic balance, what ends up happening is people are more tolerant. People leave the actions like isolated, at least more often than in their case, because we leave the good and bad up more often to the judgment of what happens. Because people don't try and like assume always an explicit like characterization of the divine entity, and because of that, what ends up happening is people basically are more likely to say you will get your own retribution. We actually get more personal identity because people are actively basically choosing their own actions, and then the retribution in the that they think is going to happen in the afterlife occurs accordingly. So because of that, people actually say, my actions have a direct impact. I'm going to do this explicitly, and I know the consequences. They actually know what's going to happen. Okay, now and so we could see this in like, for example, like, when we, if we were to have like, a karmic state or something, then we basically see that people are more likely to, donate to, poor countries, even if it's selfish, even if they do it for a negative intention, which Op brought up. Basically, it doesn't matter because we're just saying that they would be doing it, and donations are good because they provide, for example, in some cases, more opportunities. Okay, so also we just want to quickly show that people are more hopeful in this case, so they know that they can act according to how they are. And if, let's say, a person doesn't believe at all and will never believe, then they're more likely to be incredibly upset and depressed for their entire life. Okay, now lastly, we win this debate because we provide a society in which people are not only happier, as I just talked about, but also more likely to do good actions. Doesn't matter the intention, doesn't matter why they're actually, why they think they should do it. It just matters that they're more likely to do it, and also less likely to exclude because they have this. Because this code is not entrenched in society's consideration, it's entrenched in the consideration that God will decide. Okay, we're proud to propose.
We thank the speaker for the honorable remarks. We now come to the floor. The deputy leader of the opposition. Protect the time.
My name is Steven. Okay. The time will start now. First of all, I'll start by summarizing the way that their case and their arguments fleshed out. But however, we tell you that in this debate, there are two kinds of arguments, right? If they want to approach the motion from a practical level, then we're talking about specific religions. For example, we're talking about those religions working based on divine mercy, that is Christianity, and those religions that is based on karmic balance, that is Buddhism and Hinduism. So that's the reason that their church argument actually goes into this category, because that is a practical level of argument in this debate round. However, we're also telling you, besides practical level argument, we also have principle level argument, that is whether the ability to judge the good and bad is false on individual themselves or the knows everything God. So we're telling that if the opposition side wants to frame this debate as a theoretical level, saying that it should from a theoretical level and a practical level, then they should not contrast church arguments versus our side versus their side of house saying that like impact value judgment, that they should talk about specific religions on both sides. So if they want to talk about both kinds of arguments, then we tell that for practical arguments, the argument doesn't really stand because if you look at reality, a lot of arguments they make up are not unique. For example, they talk about how church can be corrupted. We tell you that in Buddhism, temple can be corrupted because people still give money to temple, and they need a guidance for those like monk in the temple to tell them what is good and what is bad, so that they can operate the karmic balance based on the guidance of the monk. That's the reason why the corruption argument also holds value in their side of the house. So a lot of practical value doesn't really stand, and this debate should actually be broken down into principle level. That is whether the good or bad should be judged by individuals themselves and also the world. We would like to first of all, we tell that the individual, the ability for judging good and bad should be forced on the God instead of individual, because individual strives for karmic balance, not for good themselves, but for their better a better afterlife. What does that mean? That means that they do not have good intention. And this is actually recognized by the opposition government side of the house, and they're saying that intention doesn't matter. At least people are doing good things, so that's the better word we're striving for. However, we tell that even if you, in the case that you're striving for good, you're doing good behaviors, without actually striving to the actual virtue, you can actually create a lot of harm to other people. And because the world is very complicated and there's no perfect situation that you can actually always do good to people. For example, if you say that it is justice to bring down a factory that's polluting the environment, so you're actually doing the good you believe in. However, you list to the unemployment and the suffering of the workers in that company, so you're causing harm to them. And because you have a limited knowledge, that's the reason why you do not have the ability to judge all the good and bad comprehensively. That will actually go against your system, even if you're striving for good action. So in their side of house, you do not actually get a word that everybody is only doing good, but actually get a word that everything is so complicated that nobody is actually doing a negative good in every single thing they're conducting. Yeah.
Okay, so we're just saying that society would generally consider this. We're not saying that we're like explicitly changing anything that's like, you know, we're just saying that people would think, oh, we're going to do good in this current context.
Okay,
so
if you're talking about the mindset, we tell that their intention is not for virtue, but actually for a better life. So that's utilitarianism, which has not any impact. And B, we're also talking about, if you're not talking about any practical benefit, then that basically means that you guys have no impact at all, which is exactly the reason why we should win this debate round. And we would like to refute some arguments. For example, how like divine mercy will actually have effect on better life, right? We talk about there's no perfect calculation for every single situation in life. So this burden should not be forced on individual, but should actually be forced on God, because God knows everything and He will do the best decision for you. And even if you do not believe that, this is actually what the believers of divine mercy do. So we say that in this case, actually the result will not go against their own initial wish. However, in your side of the house, you're saying that like even if like individuals are judging good and bad themselves, like the result will often, well, in some cases go against their initial wish, which is not in anybody's interest. And B, we talk about in their side of the house, because people actually don't have the ability to judge every single good and bad. Like people are actually struggling because every time they make a decision, they're considering whether my decision is beneficial or not. However, some of them might also even realize that their decision have a different impact on different like actors get involved. That's the reason why like nobody can have the ability to make the full comprehensive judgment, and all of their life will be struggling making different decisions, and without having a faithful life and faithful value judgment in our side of the house, because all of the behaviors in our side of the house is given judged by the God. So also we want to talk about in our side of the house, we're actually portraying divine mercy as actually symbolism of hopeful life, because no matter how life sucks and how bad life is, like you can actually get a better life if you have a very close correlation with God. However, in your side of the house, like for those people who do not actually have the ability to get have the resources to achieve common good for more people, like you're actually blocked away from a better afterlife, because only those who have power, who have resources, can do charity, can do good things to people on a large level. So that's the reason why it is on their side of the house, it's not the most people can benefit. However, on our side of the house, like we can benefit everyone. And we also say that because there's a mindset of calculating good and bad, so you're actually using good as an excuse to do the bad things. What does that mean? That means that if you have done enough good things in your life, as you believe, you will have enough reasons to do any injustice thing as long as those injustice altogether does not outweigh the good. What does that mean? That means that in that case, there's no moral judgment on your side. However, in our side, we're talking about how value judgment is all operated consistently throughout a person's life and without any controversial debate, because all of the judgment will be made by the God. And I'll move on to impact. What does both sides words look like? On their side of the house, people wish to do good, not because they're striving for virtue, but because they're striving for a utilitarian good. So that's the A, they do not have good intention. And B, people cannot get good because all of the situations are so contradictory to each other. And that's the reason why even if people act for better action, however, all of the actions go against each other, and there will always be someone get harmed in whichever action a person does. So they do not get what they want. And for our side of the house, we tell that we're striving for virtue because we believe whatever God said is true. And that's the reason why we have better intention. And B, we're saying that we also have a better world because no matter whatever decision have any impact on other people, our action is always based on our own consistent value judgment, which means that at least people, whenever they're making decisions, they're not struggling of making decisions, but they can make decisions peacefully. That's the reason why our side of the house, we're better. Also, we benefit more people. Yeah, that's the reason.
Thank you, Speaker, for the honorable remarks, and I now call to the floor the member of government to close out this debate. You're here.
More calm. I can tell you're attempting to be more calm.
It's fine.
Oh my God, it's Nate. Hey.
You have to come to the speech.
I came specifically for your speech.
I call a member of government to the floor for the second time.
Yeah. I'm just fixing it. The other new people are saying hi. Can you read that motion?
You should join us for Slack.
Wait.
Okay, good?
Yeah.
I think, as we can clearly see, there's a disagreement in what the intent of people's good actions are in this debate. And opposition likes to come up here and say that somehow we only do it out of this weird sense of calculations, and they do it out of the strong moral basis of good for being the sake of good. I think when you look at the reality of the situation, we set a clear picture of what the intentions are for these people's actions. What's going to happen is, on the karmic balance side, people inherently doing good for the sake of being good and to help out others, which will help out their personal situation. But on the opposition side, they do what they think is in the best intention of their divine figure and what will get them the best standing of their divine figure, which will therefore help their personal situation. So, if we look at what happens, we look at this situation of which side promotes more exclusion. And I think this clearly comes on their side. What happens is, if you are being good for the sake of being good, it doesn't matter what others' religions are. If you're just in this karmic balance situation, and someone has a different religion of you, as long as they're just doing good for maybe a different belief, they're still doing good. But on their side of the house, when you have this sake of this divine mercy, that person could be doing good, but they have a different belief, they have a different divine figure. That's not your divine figure. So therefore, there is more exclusion there, because you disagree about what their inherent interests are. And I think one of the biggest showings of this known out right now is, and one of the biggest problems with this, is the issue of conversion. Historically, this intent for divine mercy has caused massive attempts at conversion, which bring about, like, obviously the biggest historical harm in this debate, because what happens is there is a disagreement between what can be considered good for other people and what can be considered good in the interest of your divine figure. Because it is in the interest of your divine figure to have more people believe in your religion. Because as the Spaniards in Catholic Spain felt, it was their moral duty to go around and convert everyone and convert them all to this divine figure in order to promote their religion, and it's in their best interest, and they go to heaven by doing this. It's not that what they're doing is inherently good, it's that it's in the best interest of their divine figure and therefore their own personal case. Yes.
Okay, first of all, this is taking us at our worst. Taking you at your worst, you still have similar issues. Secondly, when you look at like historically what Christians and Catholics are doing when they're converting, they're not doing it for God. They're doing it to save the other people so that they have a chance at divine mercy as well. They're doing it out of good intentions, not towards the divine figure, but towards those people as well.
Here's the thing. What you're saying on your side is because you have this divine figure, you inherently think that their ideals are wrong. We are saying that we're doing it because as long as they are good, they are good. It's not on your side of the house where it's, oh, they need to be on our side in order to be saved. It's your belief that, oh, they need to be on our side, which brings all this exclusion, and this conversion, and this harm. You can't just, so yes, that is the worst historical example. But inherently and more broadly, it just applies to the fact that if they are not in your camp, they are somehow wrong, which applies to more than just the most extreme case. Now, going into this other point about agency, it's not necessarily like, I think they brought up clearly the point about like, okay, there are central figures that control access to it when you have a divine right, such as the church or whatever. But it's also the fact that you yourself don't have the ability necessarily to change your position. Because on our side of the house, you can do good to improve your own case. On their side, you can do some good, but it's ultimately not up to you. Even if you try and you're really faithful, it's the decision's not in your hands. Which ultimately, we think on our side of the house, this uncertainty that comes from there about, am I going to impress this divine figure? Is it going to be enough? Is really a harm on people's like mental health and people's like quality of life, as opposed to ours, where you do have the control, you do have the ability to change that. Now, going into one of their, some of the points that they bring up. So, they like to say that, okay, there's going to be paranoia on our side, because people are always going to be paranoid about whether they're doing well. We don't think that's necessarily unique, because you can be paranoid about whether or not your divine figure thinks of you highly enough, as opposed to ours where it's like, okay, yes, you can help someone out who's hungry. There, that's good, as opposed to help someone out who's hungry, but am I also praying enough? Is this also good enough for them? There's going to be paranoia on both sides of the house. It's not exclusive. Second, I think their strongest point is this idea that, okay, there is an inherent barrier to people's ability to do charity on our side of the house. I think that might be the strongest point they brought up here. There are issues with this, though. The issue is that with all these calculations about what it means to be good or bad, there's obviously going to be this to each according to their means part of the calculation. Someone who is poor and is really, really, really needing food and steals bread is obviously going to be viewed differently than a rich guy who wants to steal bread just for the sake of stealing bread. No. So, yes, we know that like people don't have the the same level of wealth to give out. But our conception of good is not based off of a dollar value. I gave $1 million, you gave 1,000, therefore you are doing 1,000th the good. We think that it's to each according to their means, which is a huge thing in this situation. But also, because it's to each according to their means and not just faith, that means that those who have the power and those who have the wealth are incentivized to use it for good purposes. Because on your side of the house, someone can come to power through evil means, through these like, I don't know, through these terrible means to access wealth, and on your side of the house, all they need to do is
Last chance?
no. All they need to do is have enough faith and show their dedication to their divine right figure and show that they are committed and can be access to the salvation. But on our side of the house, those people need to do this good and they need to contribute to their own ability and to their own means, which incentivizes them to actually redistribute the wealth and actually give back to the people who are hungry, who are needy, who they may have sinned in the past. We think that ultimately, like, yes, it is to each according to their means, but that means that, like, essentially those who have the ability will better reallocate their resources and better create good, as opposed to just sitting inside a room and reading the Bible long enough and thinking that can be enough to recoup for their sins in the past. Going back over what we've had in this debate, we think that I think I've clearly shown for you the inherent motivation. Yes, both sides are going to be selfish, but on our side, people are doing good for the sake of this end goal of good, not for impressing this divine figure, which means that even if people have other religious beliefs as you, that they're not inherently wrong, and you're not going to inherently try and convert them or exclude them. You're doing what's in their best interest of having a nice life. So in addition, going into that, we think it's clearly to each according to their own means. And we think that does not have this big burden, they say, like a barrier to entry. Ultimately, we give people more agency in achieving their own paths.
Good round, everybody. Maybe.
You're not gonna
States, Poland,